Hey everyone, it's Chris at Mapbox here with another introductory video about the Mapbox Snowflake native app. In the past videos, we've covered geocoding, reverse geocoding, and batch geocoding. Today, we're going to cover a stored procedure available in the Snowflake native app called Boundaries Reverse Enrich. And Boundaries Reverse Enrich will take a latitude and longitude coordinate, and it'll actually give you back a detailed response of all the administrative boundaries that it falls within. So before we jump into the sequel, let's talk a little bit about the boundaries themselves. So Mapbox Boundaries is a data product that Mapbox continuously maintains and releases. The boundaries themselves actually are turned into boundaries that will show up in styles if you use Mapbox for your mapping purposes. We also sell it as a bulk data product for those that want to use it for their own data science workflows or other spatial workflows that they need to run. So it gets used in a lot of different places in the Mapbox ecosystem, and now it's part of the Snowflake app. So another way to actually get a better understanding of the boundaries dataset and how it's structured is to use the Boundaries Explorer. So this is a web app that we've built that lets you drill down into the different administrative levels that we have. So right now, when we start, it's on administrative level 1, so ADM 1 here, which is going to be the state or the federal district. So if you're in Canada, this would be a province, but basically whatever is below nation level. If we were to let's click this drop down, we'll go to ADM 0. So now the entire country is highlighted and we can click on different countries. So here's Canada, here's Mexico. And then if we want to go deeper, let's go back to the US and let's click here and go down to county. So that's ADM 2. So now we're looking at county level boundaries. And if we want to go further, we have townships. So within the counties, each of these has an identifier and we can learn more about these boundaries. You can also see that there's legislative districts, there's localities, there's postal zip code, there's postal codes, there's statistical areas, so like census related areas. So lots of different boundaries that you might need to understand if you have spatial data. So let's go back up to the country level. We'll zoom out a little bit. So this will be a great place for you to explore and just get familiar with the boundaries data set and what, the responses that you get back in Snowflake when you're using our stored procedure are going to correspond to the administrative levels you see here. And you may want to, if you're getting back codes for counties that you're not familiar with, this may be a great place to come look them up and find them. Okay, so that's basically what boundaries is. And without further ado, we'll get back to the SQL. So here I am in my Snowflake environment. And you can see the function signature, or I guess it's the procedure signature for this stored procedure. It's called Mapbox Boundaries Reverse Enrich. So unlike the previous functionality in the Snowflake native app, which you just call as a SQL function, this is a stored procedure. So you actually have to have a table that exists before you can use this. So this acts on a table. And effectively what it will do is create a new column. And in that column will be a JSON result that has all the boundaries information. So all we need to do is feed it a table. So we need the database, the schema, and the table to define the table. We need to tell it the longitude and latitude columns. So that's what these two arguments are here. And there's some other options, but that's kind of the minimum at this point. We also need a destination column name. So we have to have our table set up with basically an empty column or a column that we're going to overwrite with the boundaries data. So let's jump in and try this out. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a dummy table. So it's going to have 5 rows in it, and a longitude column, a latitude column, and a boundaries basic column. So the boundaries basic column we're going to set to nulls, and then the longitude and latitude are all for cities in the United States. So we've got LA, Salt Lake City, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Atlanta. And let's just run all this SQL, and we will see our 5-row dummy table come into existence, and then we'll move on to actually doing the boundary lookup. So let's run that. I think at the end I have a select all, so let's see what shows up here. So here's our table. So again, longitude and latitude exist, and then boundaries basic is an empty column. We're going to actually use the stored procedure to populate that column. All right, so with our dummy table in hand, we're actually ready to call the stored procedure. So the syntax will just be call mapbox.core. Again, this is what we called the app, but you might call it something different. And then we say mapbox _ boundaries _ reverse _ enrich, and then we pass in all of the parameters. So I'll go through them one by one, and then we can execute it. So DB name, schema, and table should be self-explanatory. This is our table name that we just created. Then we have the destination column name. So if you recall, we added boundaries underscore basic as our empty column, which is full of nulls. Then there's the incremental. So incremental set to false. Let's go back and take a look at the docs here. But if true, the procedure will only update rows that have a null value. So yeah, this will prevent it from overwriting in that column. But everything's set to null, so it doesn't matter. And then finally, we have longitude and latitude. So those are just the names of the two columns that have our longitude and latitude respectively. And then last is basic. So this is the param boundaries set. So param boundary set, let's go back and look at the docs again. It's either going to be basic or detailed. So basic will get you all of these administrative levels. So ADM 0, 1, 2, and then LOC 1, LOC 2, LOC 3, LOC 4. Basically, the basic list of boundaries that most people will probably need. And then we also have detailed if you want all of it, and that will get you a much bigger response, but you might not need all that extra information. So keep it at basic. And then worldview. Worldview is something in Mapbox where people interpret the world in different ways because of boundary disputes and things of that nature. So right now, this is set to null because there's only one option, which is the US worldview, but that may be changing in the future. So anyway, this is the procedure call. Let's actually run it. So it's performing all these calculations to figure out which boundaries the latitude and longitudes in my table intersect with. And we should get a message here in a moment that it's complete. All right, so there's our success feedback. And then let's run a select all on my table, which has now been modified. Okay, so instead of boundaries basic having nothing in it, we now have some JSON. So if we click on the field, let's bring this up so we can see a little bit more of the results here. So we can actually explore the JSON results here. And just like we did in our other Snowflake videos, we want to actually parse this probably and pull out some important things that we want out of this response because we don't need all of it. But just to familiarize ourselves with the response a little bit, if you click here, you'll see it's an object and the first key in the object is administrative 0. So this would be the country level. And if we scroll down, we've got, the area of the country. If we needed that, we've got a bounding box. But what we probably care most about is the ISO code. So US for all of these should be the same. And there's also a name in here. So United States, etc. And we can keep going further. So we have lots of different translations, different languages and things like that. So we get down to ADM1. This is going to tell us where each of these cities is located in the state. So we'll scroll down here and we should see name Nebraska, and then I also see joint attributes ISO 3166_2 US-NE. So this is like a commonly used standardized code for Nebraska. So this is the result of the stored procedure call. So you probably want to store this, or if you don't want to store all that information, you could parse information out of it. So I'm going to give you another quick example of how to parse out just like the state name, for example. So we could store that somewhere else. It all depends on what your workflow is. So let's keep going. So all we need to do is actually just call the column name, and then we use a colon to just drill down into the JSON. So we don't care about administrative level 0. We know they're all in the US. So let's go get administrative level 1, which would be the state, and then the name property, and we'll call that state name. And then we'll also dig into the join attributes property and then pull out the ISO _3166_2 value, and that will be our ISO code. So I'm just giving new column names to these two properties and then pulling them out of the JSON. So let's run this and you'll see what we get as a result. So again, you don't have to store the data this way. You could just query for these things, but this is how you would query this JSON response inside of Snowflake. And you can see we have a nice clean table with longitude, latitude, state name, and the ISO code. So this could then be used further downstream in whatever my analysis is. Or I could group by and count these things and figure out where all my data came from. So I think that'll wrap us up for the stored procedure call for boundaries reverse enrich in the Mapbox Snowflake native app. So I hope this has been helpful and that you find some value in the Mapbox Snowflake native app. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments, you can drop into our developer Discord. Go check out the boundaries resources that I shared earlier, the Boundaries Explorer and the documentation for the boundaries dataset to learn more about it. And we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.